Almighty God, who in thy infinite wisdom and providential goodness has appointed the offices of rulers and councils for the welfare of society and the just government of man, we beseech thee to behold with thy abundant favor as thy servants, whom thou hast been pleased to call to the performance of such important trusts in the Commonwealth of Dominica. Let thy blessing descend upon us here in this parliament assembled, and grant that we may, as in thy presence, treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote thy honor and glory, and to advance the good of those whose interests thou hast committed to our charge, all which we ask in the name and for the sake of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. House resumes and debate continues.
Mr. Speaker, I to rise like my colleagues before me to support these supplementary estimates presented before this Honorable House. Mr. Speaker, with a gross total of $275.2 million EC dollars, 90% of which is local funding, Mr. Speaker. And this is, in my opinion, extremely, very, very significant. And I'll tell you why. Because each and every cent, Mr. Speaker, presented in this supplementary estimates represents $275.2 million that has been used, Mr. Speaker, to better the lives of the everyday Dominican, the everyday Joe public, Mr. Speaker. And I'm very proud, I feel extremely proud to be part of a government, Mr. Speaker, which can come up, Mr. Speaker, in this season that we're living in, after going through an economic depression some years ago, two major disasters, Tropical Storm America and Hurricane Maria, where we lost over 300% of our GDP, our gross domestic product, Mr. Speaker. And now, 2 years into, Mr. Speaker, a pandemic that has seen economies around the globe, Mr. Speaker, crippled, we could still come up with $275.2 unbudgeted dollars, Mr. Speaker, to take care and to improve the lives of the everyday Dominican, Mr. Speaker. And this is why I think I'm very much bewildered, Mr. Speaker, as to the approach that the opposition is taking, Mr. Speaker. Instead of using or looking for all sorts of innuendos, I think they should be commending the government, Mr. Speaker, and asking us, where you guys getting this? You know, how do you do it? You know, how do you do it in this government season? Because, Mr. Speaker, when we look at the programs, and projects that have been, that this funding has, that this money has gone into, Mr. Speaker, each and every one of them, Mr. Speaker, important aspects of the life of the everyday Dominicans. And you can speak of the housing, Mr. Speaker, infrastructural interventions, health, agriculture, and not forgetting the NDP. And I will spend a few minutes, Mr. Speaker, speaking up on each of these interventions. But as I said, Mr. Speaker, the opposition, if they want to make themselves a viable option, Mr. Speaker, to Dominican people, to make themselves relevant to Dominican people, Mr. Speaker, a government in waiting, although I think one of my colleagues earlier said that they might be waiting forever. They should be working for, Mr. Speaker, and commending the government for putting together or coming up with this funding, because each and every one of these interventions, Mr. Speaker, were necessary. The Speaker, housing, and of course our housing program is of course closely related to our much talked about citizenship by investment program. And Mr. Speaker, I'm one of the members of, or one of the MPs here in this honorable house who can testify, or who can probably say, thank God for the CBI. Mr. Speaker, because I see no other way, Mr. Speaker, that post-Tropical Storm America, that this government, Mr. Speaker, would come up with the funds, Mr. Speaker, up front to be able to relocate not one, but two communities within the PD7 constituency, Mr. Speaker. And we speak to the construction of almost 400 climate-resilient homes in the Bellevue shopping area, Mr. Speaker. So I, for one, am a very strong advocate and supporter of the CBI program, Mr. Speaker. And I think my learned friends on the other side should try to take some time, Mr. Speaker, to see what the program entails, instead of printing pictures of TikTok or Facebook or whatever, Mr. Speaker, and come waving it like it's some sort of trophy or some sort of achievement. They should be seeking to see how the program works, Mr. Speaker, and see Atuka. Well, we're not allowed to speak part of, but just in case, remotely, Mr. Speaker, that they come into government, they know how it works, and they can continue this program. Because this program, as I said, Mr. Speaker, has been the one supporting the backbone of activities here in Dominica. And God knows what would have happened, Mr. Speaker, to Dominica, were it not for the CBI program. I mentioned the housing, Mr. Speaker, and I mentioned the relocation of not just one, but two communities within the PD7 constituency. We recall Tropical America devastated my hometown of PD7, and also another community within the constituency, Dubic, Mr. Speaker. And while the initial resettlement of Dubic was done under the then Petrocasa arrangement, that's our arrangement with the Venezuelan government. Hurricane Maria, which came along 2 years later, also did a number on these Petrocasas. So right now we're in the process of rebuilding these Petrocasas, Mr. Speaker, again under another housing program under the CBI initiative, Mr. Speaker. We're talking about 50 homes for the Dubic residents, 50 Petrocasas that had to be flattened, demolished, and rebuilt, Mr. Speaker, to climate resilient specifications. So when I said that, I, for one, am a strong advocate, Mr. Speaker, and praying every day, and thanking God every day that we had this CBI program in place to look after the needs of our people, because no one foresaw rather the tropical storm Erika. No one foresaw, or if the damage rather caused by Hurricane Maria. Yes, we would have got no Hurricane 1 or tropical storm, but especially tropical storm Erika. I think no one woke up that morning and imagined what happened overnight, Mr. Speaker, where we had to relocate, as I said, not one, but two entire communities. So this is why, Mr. Speaker, and I don't think it has sunk in properly into the hard skulls or cranium of the opposition. This is why we have what they call a supplementary estimate, Mr. Speaker, that is to take care of unforeseen expenses that may occur from time to time. And I'm not sure which one of my colleagues, I think it was Lady Daniel, the member of for Colio, who spoke about most of us, all of us are homeowners, Mr. Speaker. And we know that we budget sometimes. We put aside something every month for the bills, for food, groceries, children expenses, etc. But from time to time, things happen. We might have a plumbing leak, Mr. Speaker, that maybe would result maybe in unforeseen damage to our home. We now have to see now where we get now the funds to take care of this, which wasn't budgeted for, which wasn't planned for, Mr. Speaker. So the very same happens with a supplementary estimate. And as I said, the government should be commended, Mr. Speaker, in this government season for coming up with $275.2 million to implement programs and projects that are changing the lives of the everyday Dominican people. Infrastructural interventions, Mr. Speaker, and we study under the Ministry of Public Works, Mr. Speaker, numerous interventions, all in an effort to continue to build climate resilience in our country. And we heard the proclamation of the Honorable Prime Minister post-Hurricane Maria in our aspirations to become the world's first climate resilient nation. And every intervention we have done, where it started post-Erika, but in particular post-Hurricane Maria, Mr. Speaker, has been towards achieving this goal. And my colleague, the Honorable Minister for Sports and many other things, Honorable Roslyn Paul, mentioned, that is being manifested, Mr. Speaker, in today. The past hurricane season, we had very little people seeking shelter, Mr. Speaker, because of the investment that the government has made into building climate resilient homes. I can speak to my constituency, for example, and I was having a conversation with some friends of mine recently, Mr. Speaker, and I know that when, as a government, we're doing well for people, and even I may narrow it down to as a member of parliament, because I'm one of these members of parliament. You know, the PD7 constituency is a very vulnerable area. I mean, susceptible to floods and all sorts of stuff. And then the last two weather events we had, Mr. Speaker, lots of rain. Didn't receive not one call, not one call, not one photo, not one video, Mr. Speaker, of any threat to life or property. And I could tell you that I would be drunk, Mr. Speaker, inundated in calls and videos in the past when we have any little shower, Mr. Speaker. So I know that we have done well for people, because right now people living in safer homes rather. Millions of dollars were spent in the dredging of the waterways, the rivers. Yes, we do have some work to do. And the new member of Parliament for Granby, we've already discussed some interventions, like the Mitcham Bridge and a couple of the areas that are common to both of the constituencies that needs emergency. But I know that we've done well when I could sleep well, Mr. Speaker, without being drowned in phone calls and WhatsApp messages and videos, or people cannot sleep, their homes are leaking, etc., Mr. Speaker. I'm not saying that all is 100% fine and dandy, but I know that we are getting there, Mr. Speaker, slowly but surely. In the area of health, again, Mr. Speaker, if you look for the supplementary estimates, some of these funds were spent on the building of health facilities, health centers. I think if I recall, 12 health centers throughout the island, Mr. Speaker, and 2 undercards, I think, somewhere in the valley, and Cottage, if I remember. And again, Mr. Speaker, I'm the proud recipient of 2 of these health facilities. The 57 constituency, rather, is the proud recipient of 2 of these health facilities. One already commissioned in Bellevue-Chopin, and the other soon to be commissioned, completed, and soon to be commissioned in the Bagatelle community, Mr. Speaker. So that's why I said earlier that each and every cent, Mr. Speaker, has been spent to better the lives of our people. Because this government has also undertaken, is also undertaking, Mr. Speaker, a serious thrust, Mr. Speaker, towards improving the health system here in Dominica. And in addition to the Dominica China Friendship Hospital, which of course, as we know, is a gift, a grant from our friends from the People's Republic of China, we also invested in another massive health facility in the north. That is the Northeast, or what is commonly known to as the Murragot Hospital. And we don't hear, Mr. Speaker, the member for Murragot coming to the House and speaking of that. And I think it's my good friend and brother, the Senator Esprit, who yesterday pointed out, while every day they come here, every time we have the House, they come here crying, oh, these things are politically tainted and all of this, Mr. Speaker. Senator Esprit brilliantly proved them wrong yesterday. He pointed out the investments that are being done in constituencies and communities that did not vote for the Dominican Labour Party. And Murragot is such a case. They did not receive not 1, but 2 health facilities, including a major hospital, Mr. Speaker, that is going to provide most of the services, if not all of the services, that is currently being provided at the Dominica China Friendship Hospital. And this is something I think that the member of Murragot, or as he likes to call himself, the leader of the parliamentary opposition, should come in, Mr. Speaker, and speak to the people about. And yes, we're not saying as a government that we have all the answers. We're not saying that we're perfect. And there's nothing wrong, Mr. Speaker, in pointing out to us from time to time where they think that we can do better. But I think it's a little disingenuous of them, Mr. Speaker, to come in here time and time, Mr. Speaker, meeting after meeting, session after session, and try to give the impression that everything is so wrong in Dominica. Like the senator did, Mr. Speaker. And my Kalinago brave brother, I'm the Minister for Kalinago Affairs, had to come in to correct her. Because she painted the picture like the Kalinago territory was in tatters. You with me, Mr. Speaker? And that is so far from the truth. The investment that the government has made in the Kalinago territory, Mr. Speaker, in housing and others, is tremendous and ongoing. So we really wish, Mr. Speaker, that they would, that the opposition members would at least make themselves a bit more relevant, a bit more, how will I put it, useful, and see how they can work with us to see how we can better improve the lives of Dominican, of the everyday Dominican. I like to call it everyday Joe Public. And finally, Mr. Speaker, because I mean everybody before me spoke so eloquently and pointed out all of the beautiful programs, the much talked about NEP. And Mr. Speaker, I was flabbergasted to listen to I think a trained environmental health officer like Senator Masne. I'm trying to remember his surname. Clement. Senator Clement Masne, Mr. Speaker. You know, talk down, Mr. Speaker, to the NEP workers. And again, I don't want to rehash the explanation as to what the NEP entails. The NEP, again, as Senator Esprit explained, that the NEP is made up of a number of companies, Mr. Speaker. We have NEP interns working in banks, Mr. Speaker, in offices, all type of offices, lawyers and doctors. We have NEP interns as education mentors throughout all the schools in Dominica. And the cleanup and beautification aspect of it, cleanup and beautification is just one aspect of the NEP, Mr. Speaker. And to me, Mr. Speaker, arguably is probably the most important. So while Senator Clement Marston is coming and talking down, we have those people by the road dressed in red, Mr. Speaker. And I will tell you why they're dressed in red, Mr. Speaker. They're dressed in red because they are thankful to the Dominican Labour Party government, Mr. Speaker, for giving them this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to earn an income, as small as it is, but to earn an income to help them support themselves and their family, Mr. Speaker. And I explain why. And again, I'm not sure which of my colleagues before me explained that they might be even better off, Mr. Speaker, than somebody coming to town with a $3,000 a month salary, Mr. Speaker. Because these interns work 3 days a week, for a limited hours, Mr. Speaker, come clean your neighborhood. And as I was pointing out to some of my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, at last night's dinner, these are chores or activities that in the past decades ago people would do voluntarily when people took a bit more pride in their community. But we realized that society has changed a lot, Mr. Speaker, and the government realized that we need to keep our environment clean, especially in light of some of these natural disasters where we have a lot of blocked waterways, etc. So here we have, Mr. Speaker, hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals, especially in the rural areas, who otherwise would have no source of income. They leave their homes, Mr. Speaker. They don't have to worry about paying transportation to some other area to work. They don't have to worry about buying fancy clothes to come to town. They don't have to worry about proper meals. They could leave their home and they could leave the project and go to their home and eat whatever it is that they have, Mr. Speaker. They provided in their homes that particular day. So every fortnight, every month, Mr. Speaker, these are individuals who now have an income to help pay their bills, Mr. Speaker, to help take care of their daily expenses. And as I said, they still have time on their hands to engage in other income-earning activities, Mr. Speaker, if they choose to. So when you hear the people crying down the NEP, Mr. Speaker, the National Employment Program, especially the Cleanup and Beautification Program, to me, this is one of the most ingenious programs and initiatives that this government has ever undertaken, Mr. Speaker, because we have thousands of people now with some sort of income. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, our country, communities, and country by extension is being kept sparkling clean, Mr. Speaker. And I don't know for the other communities, Mr. Speaker. I can speak to, I can speak to the PD7 constituency. I'm not sure when last you drove for the PD7 constituency to see the wonderful work being done by the NEP teams from Bellevue Chopin all the way to Bagatelle. And even the old PD7, Mr. Speaker, yes, I do have a small NEP team in the old PD7 to make sure that the drains and the roads and everything are kept clear, because we do have people going up there from time to time. While we discourage them from actually living there, we do have people going up to the old PD7 from time to time, Mr. Speaker. And the job that by NEP teams are doing within the PD7 constituency, Mr. Speaker, is nothing short of phenomenal. In fact, such great work that a number of my colleagues have asked that they borrow my NEP team, Mr. Speaker, especially the team from Bagatelle. I mean, yes, including Minister Blackmore, have asked that they borrow my NEP, yeah. So Mr. Speaker, so I for one, like I did with the Citizenship by Investment program, all hail the NEP, Mr. Speaker. All hail the NEP, because and moving around, Mr. Speaker, as a member of Parliament, and I see the folks and what I think the opposition should be doing is when they pass the NEP I'm working hard, Get them some juice, Mr. Speaker. Go get them some juice, some water, and applaud them, Mr. Speaker, for the hard work they're doing. Instead of driving by, maybe, and looking down their noses at them, Mr. Speaker, but who are these people by the road dressed in red? And I said, the red they dressed in, Mr. Speaker, they have reason to dress in red. They're celebrating that they are now proud to be keeping their communities and country clean, and at the same time, Mr. Speaker, earning some sort of income for their family. With these few words, Mr. Speaker, as I said, much has been said by all the other contributors before me. I wholeheartedly support the measure before the House. That's the supplementary estimate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Honorable Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the supplementary appropriation. But before I make my contribution, I wish to beg your indulgence. Hope you'll forgive me, I'm out of practice. Mr. Speaker, I didn't intend to speak this morning because I felt that my colleagues, those who presided over the expenditure that we seek approval for today, have the competence to respond and to present. And so far, they have done so with distinction. But I feel moved to add my contribution after listening to some of the comments made and contributions made by the parliamentary opposition. Mr. Speaker, just to put a few things in context, looking at the backdrop in which this supplementary estimate is being presented. On January 30th of 2020, the World Health Organization declared a public health concern over the spread of the COVID-19 virus. By March 11 of 2020, the WHO declared a pandemic. Now, when a pandemic is declared, countries are forced to take notes, but more importantly, to take action. Those actions have implications for trade, commerce, production, economies. Every country must find resources to prevent the spread of that virus. And Dominica, being no exception, had to take actions to ensure that we protect lives and livelihoods occasioned by the spread of the COVID-19 virus. But Mr. Speaker, again, when I listened to the debate, I felt, to my mind, that this is a classic case where a government is overperforming. You know, people normally accuse politicians of promising and not delivering. But in this case, it's a case of overperformance. Because a supplementary appropriation must be taken alongside the budget of that fiscal year. So having come to the Parliament, having approved a budget, and then realizing that, oops, there are some emergencies which you need to respond to. Or perhaps you're saying, you know, I'm not sure if I have money for that, so I'm not going to put it in the national budget. But if things turn out good enough, you know, if just like you know, at your home, you want to buy something for Christmas for the kids, and you're saying, boy, I don't have enough, you know, but if my sister sends me a little 200 US, maybe things, you know, so things get better. Because the debates really should be, how did the government get $275 million? That, to me, is what the debate is about. Because it's not even about looking at obviously the opposition need to have a discussion on every line item to get an explanation so that they can understand. And sometimes they choose not to understand. But that is what the discussion should be about. So this is a classic case of a government overperforming. Mr. Speaker, the other thing that is so glaring and obvious, and my colleagues have spoken about it, is the fact that people try to use it as a bad thing. We have sort of reversed our fortunes. And doesn't mean reversing fortunes is not misfortunes, you know. It just means that your fortunes are coming from a different source. So previous years, we would talk about grant funding being the significant contributor to financing those activities. But this time, we're seeing 90% of the resources are coming from local funding. How is a government able to get, in actual terms, $248 million from local funds during a pandemic? And I started by saying a pandemic has serious implications. During a pandemic, we're still able to mobilize $248 million from local funds. Clearly, this is a government that knows how to manage a country. And we don't even have to again remind, and I thank my honorable colleague, Minister Daru, Minister of Foreign Affairs, for making the point and the reminder of the impact, like several colleagues before him have done, of Tropical Storm Erica and Hurricane Maria. But how is the government able to mobilize those resources? And we'll speak a little about that later. But I just wanted to highlight, again, something else that I listened to other members on the other side talk about, that it is because of our inability to plan, that's why we have supplementary estimates. I mean, there are two things that happen after you've had a budget. And we have the experts, they've used their best efforts to make projections and to plan. But one, they're emergencies. And if you look at D26 and see that we had how many? Was it there where we had 23? We had 23 Dominicans who en route to Canada but had to be accommodated somewhere. That is an emergency. That is an emergency. That's what supplementary estimates are there for. Who would have foreseen that 23 Dominicans would have been stranded somewhere en route to Canada? And this government, being the generous government that it is, provided for them, provided accommodation for them. That is why we have supplementary estimates. When we didn't plan on a volcano erupting in St. Vincent, I mean, who would have foreseen that? So this is why you have supplementary estimates. Because we didn't see that coming, and as a result, government assisted, provided $1 million on the D21 to our friends, as they did when we got hit by a hurricane. So this is what we're talking about. This D31 from the Ministry of Finance. We provided support. COVID-related expenses. Even if we were in the pandemic by the time the budget was passed, we did not. Most countries, and the experts will tell you, some of them speculated that COVID will be around for a long time. But who would have known that we would have had such infection? And if you had come to the parliament and budgeted for such high numbers of people getting infected and so much resources required, about $7.2 million, they would say you're planning for people to get sick. This is why you have supplementary estimates. You cannot foresee those things. So one, for things unforeseen. Two, things unplanned. And there's, of course, a third category that you're hoping that you will have money, because although the Minister of Housing said that you want to do some resilient home settlement, you're not sure if you have the $31 million. So you said, okay, if things turn out well, we will do it. But there's also another part of this, that's important to note. Under the Housing Renovation and Sanitation, National Resettlement Program, Modern Resilient Housing Settlement under D34 in the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, we see the amounts that have been invested. And these, again, although we knew that we wanted to do those, we were not sure the extent to which we would have had the resources to pursue these projects. And so it is great credit to the government to be able to do that. There's another thing that I just wanted to speak to briefly, because having walked the streets, the communities of Tetmon, Montine, and Grand Bay over the last month, I have met so many people whose sole source of income is through the National Employment Program, or more properly, the National Employment and Mentorship Program. Again, my colleagues, I hope you will forgive me. I need to get a little practice, so just bear with me a bit. So many people are assisted through this program. And clearly, COVID made the demand for more people to be on that program than before. But most importantly, and I listened yesterday, and I listened to some members of the opposition, in their contribution, and when you're on the other side and things are looking too good or promising, I know how it is, Well, not quite, I've never been there. But Mr. Speaker, when you consider that people are beating on the NEP, and even the fella that they sent to run against me, he was promising to give people, a whole set of money under the NEP. But as I would say to my colleagues here, before the Dominican Labour Party and before Roosevelt Skerrit as Prime Minister of Dominica, there was no NEP. So now people want to tell us what to do with our program that we created. And I find sometimes it's just amazing how people come up with those arguments. And some fellas, let's just think about this. This was a program that was created as an opportunity for our university graduates when they come back home, in transition, as an internship program, and very importantly, it became as a mentorship program. I remember when that idea came about, that there are graduates who could help students with their work. And it was a great opportunity in the communities to create such a system. Now, there are a number of people who have transitioned from the National Employment and Mentorship Program to get full-term employment. We have seen people graduated through that process. We found ourselves having to make greater investments in the program because there was a need. The government didn't go around just speaking up people by the side of the road and just tell them, look, come, look. No, it was a demand that was created. And there are a number of reasons why that demand was created. But Mr. Speaker, another one I wanted to talk about briefly is the one on the D31, and I don't like to go into the full, long, detailed head, but I just prefer to speak to the ministry under which this was found. And the Ministry of Finance, due diligence fees under the CBI, the tune of about $5 million. Mr. Speaker, again, I spoke about overperformance, outperforming, doing better than projected. This is it. When the budget was formulated and approved, the government felt that perhaps we could get maybe 1,000 applications, and we found ourselves having so much more than we projected that it was necessary through the supplementary estimate to approve additional funds for due diligence. Now, let me spend a few minutes talking about this, Mr. Speaker. Not just the expenditure, but the reason for the expenditure, and to explain how this due diligence works and how the entire CBI itself functions. Because I listened to one of the senators on the opposition side when during the contribution. And clearly, I don't know what's in people's minds, so I would not say it was out of malice. But clearly, there was also a total misunderstanding or misrepresentation, at least I can say that one, because it was a misrepresentation, of the way the CBI works. So because, and I'll just take a little minute to talk about, well, a few seconds, talk about the video. Boss, anybody can go online and make a video. I don't know why people get excited about things they get online. When you go to research and you come back to your professor and tell them, well, I get this thing on Google, they'll tear it. You get no marks. Google is not an authority to quote. For a debate in the parliament, a video online is not an authority that you can cite. If you're making an argument, that's so many fellas who in the basement producing all kinds of things and sending it out. And the one I find I just cannot seem to understand, the same people who attack us racially, the same white supremacists who sit and spew all sort of manner of evil against our race, are the same people that have us going around with our conspiracy theories about vaccination and COVID-19, you know. That is for me the most disgusting thing about this anti-vaccine movement, you know. There are people who have genuine concerns, maybe lack of knowledge, fear, you know, some Manfred Needle, you know, all sorts of things. But to find yourself going around spreading for the same people who were the white supremacists in January 6th outside of the White House, at the Capitol building in Washington, the same people who get reasons to attack us for a race, we are becoming their tools, as they would say. They have a nice expression for that, you know. It's something like a convenient fool. You know, it's like you become, I mean, I just don't get it. I'm not saying people should not have concerns and questions. So it's the same thing as this video, I mean, and then they say the fella had a picture with us and it's because, but just to go back to the point though, the CBI, the way it works is that applicants go to an agent. These agents are found throughout the world, some in Dominica, from outside of Dominica. Applicants go to them, they express their interest, they fill a whole bunch of forms, and normally they complain, too many forms. They have to do health, they have to do tests and all sorts of things. They have to make declarations, fingerprints, and you have to run a whole background check on these people. And it's not a background check that is the simple desktop background check to see if they are Interpol most wanted. And just to say, I heard a member talking about some people who've gotten our passports on Interpol list and so forth. But there are people, the Americans gave their passport that found themselves on Interpol and went to jail, and some of them were deported. So what is that? I mean, if you give someone a passport before the fact, if you knew they were on the most wanted list and you issue a passport to them, then you're in fault. But if you give someone, you don't know what's in a man's mind, and there's no such test. Who can do that? Who can determine that? The amount of brothers and sisters we have who've been deported because they committed a crime in the US. The same opposition was chastising us years ago because they were harboring someone who the US was interested in. You remember that member for Mao constituency? So the Americans didn't know the man was going to commit a crime before they gave him their passport. Put that aside. So, Mr. Speaker, the process, you apply, the background search is done, not just a desktop background looking for Interpol, most wanted list and so forth, but there's a physical check. The agents go out to determine whether the person lives where they say they live, whether they work where they say they work, whether they attended the schools that they claim they attended. So from time to time, you may find a refusal because an applicant lied on their application and said they graduated from a university that they didn't graduate from. It is that intrusive. The due diligence process is that intrusive. After that process has been completed, a recommendation is made. It is reviewed. It is scored. There's a system of scoring every applicant to see if that applicant is suitable to be approved for citizenship, not a passport, for citizenship, to get a certificate of citizenship. Once that applicant has been approved for citizenship, they are free to proceed to apply for a passport. So there's a whole process. And that's why I agree with the point that's, well, you're not supposed to bring the speaker into controversy and into your debates. But when the leader of the opposition sought to treat this, you know, in a very callous manner to give the impression that we're selling passports, which is the same thing that the senator sought to imply, that there are people with passports and we just sell them. But I'll tell you a little about this. So, once that process is gone through, the application is sent to the passport office in Roseau in the Commonwealth of Dominica and nowhere else. Even if the submission is made somewhere at one of our embassies or missions or consulates, but they must be sent to Roseau, to the passport office for processing. And if in processing that application, it is found that there's something missing or something wrong, it will not be approved. So they have to go through a rigorous process. Once that passport is issued, then it is sent to the applicant. So we don't leave here and go to Dubai with a suitcase of passport. Nobody does that. The only time that was done is between 95 and 2000. It may have been done before that, but I know it wasn't done after 2000. I remember when, and I don't mean to say it in a way that I'm attacking or accusing anybody, it was just a fact. You remember when we had the old passports, when your picture used to be affixed to the passport, you could even wash it out, you could pull it out. And I remember once I traveled, legal minister, I went to China, we were not supposed to go to China, but I found myself in China, and I remember my picture came off from my passport. Remember we had the brown one, well, you guys too, you new, all you young, all you don't know about that, man. But remember that, minister, member for Portsmouth, member for Cottage. Remember when we had those, we had your brown diplomatic passport, and the photo was affixed to it. Could easily come out. So what used to be done back in the day is that the processor of those applications for citizenship would actually get passports. And being an honorary consul had the authority to sign on behalf of the government. But when we got into office, and Minister Blackmore, I remember the Minister of National Security at the time, we got the machine-readable passports. You couldn't do that anymore. First, we laminated it. It was just a little lamination. Wasn't that fancy? It wasn't really a machine-readable thing. Just a little thing for lamination on it so your picture wouldn't fall out or somebody could not switch it. A little more security. Then we moved to upgrade to the machine-readable passports. And now we have an even more advanced and more secure passport. So nobody can just go out there with a suitcase of passports and issue passports to anybody who applies on our street corner. So the overzealous agent or promoter or person, because we don't know. And that's the other thing about the internet. You don't know the person, but you come into the parliament as if that is some authority. But one day I have to go somewhere and make a video, and send it online and Q&A some people. Because I can't believe people are so easily fooled. I just don't understand for the life of me why people are such enemies of the truth but embrace lies so readily and happily and wear it as a badge of honor as if, boy, I good, I hold them. Or caution you, utape, some stupid nonsense, garbage. You pick up, well, oh boy, should I check handbag? Sorry. All right, but, you pick up something somewhere and all of a sudden you feel like you have some great treasure. And you go and you propagate that, you spread that, and people are proud, and they run on the radio stations and spew their nonsense. You are destroying your own country. When we go out there when we were building this program, we were last kakarats. I don't know how to say that in Creole, no? We were last, just last, right? We were last. When we were promoting the program some years ago, I remember when I used to go out there to promote the program. We were way down on the list, and the AG can bear me out on that. In a year, we had just a couple hundred applications. When our neighbors were having hundreds, and I remember the leader of the opposition, thousands. The leader of the opposition was chastising us for that once. I remember hearing him. He was not leader of the opposition at the time. But he was talking about the great things that were happening in St. Kitts and Nevis, and the billions of dollars getting into St. Kitts and Nevis, and we were getting nothing. Back then, we had a little 200, but it didn't just get to where it is by accident. It's hard work. It's strong leadership. Because of the faith that the international community has in Prime Minister Skerrit. Now, I'll tell you two things. Two things. He's our X factor. Because when he goes out there and he meets with people, they feel, yes, I want to be part of whatever happening in that country. Either through other countries or through people who are interested in becoming Dominican citizens. Because we used to have those Dominica independence celebration in Dubai. And he would take the time to meet with people. And they love it. They feel that connection. And they used to say to me that they never have that with the other prime ministers. Even when they come, they don't feel that connected. He makes the time, puts in the hours. That is how we build this program, This didn't just happen by accident. It's not because we're the cheapest. There are countries now that sell, that are getting investors at much lower prices than us. They are much lower than us. We are not at that level, as low as them. But our program is still the number one because of the X factor. And that is Roosevelt Skerrit, our Prime Minister. Because when we go out there, he puts in the hour. Whether it's anywhere in Asia, we go out and he is available. And we promote that program. But I will also say that one of the things that have made that our product so valuable is because of the countries with which we have visa waivers, the countries which we have strong relations, and people know that they can trust our program. Because of the strict due diligence process, they know when they get that passport that it is something of value. There are other countries that don't have due diligence like we do. So I just wanted to touch on that briefly, Mr. Speaker, so I hope I didn't veer too far off, but I was just responding to what the member, one of the senators, spoke about yesterday. But Mr. Speaker, the final part of my contribution speaks to project life cycle, because I think sometimes, and I heard the criticism that one of the senators on the opposition side made of our technical staff, because obviously it's not the minister you're criticizing, because it's not the minister who estimates the cost of a project, and the minister is not responsible for that.
Seven more minutes.
Thank you, Mr. No, thank you. When you consider the project life cycle, and if you go back to the estimates, about $32 million which were spent or invested, rather, actually covered projects that we are doing in conjunction with regional and international organizations, the World Bank in particular. So what we found is that we had to do land acquisition. And sometimes, even through the budget cycle, you cannot prepare properly because some of these international and regional organizations have their rules. And from time to time, they send you back, as I know very well in the case of geothermal energy development. So you plan, you prepare your budget for 1 year, and then you may realize that this thing may be pushed to another year or may be pulled forward, which is always good and doesn't happen very often. And then you may find yourself having to make investments that otherwise you did not prepare to do. So we also have that as part of the supplementary estimate. Now, if the government was not able to do this, then how would government function? It means that we would have had to wait, maybe lose the window of opportunity, and in most of these cases, if you're not able to implement by a particular time, the project ends, you lose the funding. Because they had a system in the international community, especially among donors, is use it or lose it. And once that time comes, you have no choice. So the DVRP, for one. The support to the Ministry of Agriculture is another one under the World Bank. And these are all World Bank funded projects. In our case, in geothermal energy development, we had a similar challenge. And I know that, although not specifically outlined in the document, but some of the land acquisitions, the allocations were to pay landowners in Loda for acquisition of new lands because we found out that we needed more land than we budgeted for. And that was because of technical advice. So sometimes the technical advice is to improve. It is not just because of cost overrun or unforeseen, but to improve a project. So the whole project life cycle must be also taken into account and to determine how those expenditure and investments are made to facilitate these projects. So all in all, Prime Minister, all in all, when you consider that we find ourselves in the midst of a pandemic, and just to respond to something that was said by the member for Salisbury, when he spoke about the cost of inputs. But clearly, the farmers are being assisted because the government is assisting them. So before you criticize and talk about the increasing cost of inputs, at least accept the fact that the government is assisting the farmers because the government is assisting the farmers. Now, we all acknowledge that COVID pandemic has affected the cost of production, has affected logistics and the shipping in particular. We've seen goods, steel, fuel prices have gone up at some point. And especially in the case of fertilizers, being part of the derivatives of fossil fuels, we expect there to be an increase. My student, I taught chemistry, will bear me out on that. So, so if there is an increase in fuel costs, you get hit in the raw material side, you get hit on the transportation side, so obviously there has to be an increase in the cost of fertilizers and some other inputs. What we must do, and I'm sure we are prepared to do that, is to see how we can facilitate the farmers. And I know Minister for Agriculture, and I've heard our Prime Minister speak to special arrangements that have been made to reduce the burdens on the farmers. And this is why we also encourage the farmers to organize themselves in cooperatives, in groups, so that they can get the benefits. And when these challenges arise, then we have ways to deal with them. So I just wanted to also speak to this in passing. Mr. Speaker, it is important for people to appreciate what it is that we are debating here this morning. It is important to place this in the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, and for government to be able to raise $275 million in the middle of a pandemic on top of the national budget. That is a government that knows how to manage a country in the midst of one of the greatest crises that have hit us in this century. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Senator Honorable Riviere, you can proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of State, the Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs and Planning, it would be remiss of me not to rise to give my unwavering support to this supplementary appropriation before this Honorable House. Mr. Speaker, my brief intervention is not intended to be an academic exercise on what is a supplementary appropriation or from whence it came. My intervention is rather to inform you and inform this Honorable House of the impact this appropriation is having on ordinary Dominicans in this country, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Speaker, I wish to commend the mover of the motion, Honorable Greta Roberts, who did an excellent job in ensuring that the information was clear, detailed, edifying, and so eloquently presented. Mr. Speaker, I also want to take a cue from the intelligent presentation of Honorable Kent Edwards, member of La Plaine. Mr. Edwards, or Honorable Edwards rather, highlighted a chronology of events, disasters after disasters. And Mr. Speaker, I sat in my seat almost in tears, and I say a simple prayer: thank God that the Dominican Labour Party is in power. Or, what a disaster it would have been had it been another government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this supplementary appropriation suggests that we have a caring government, we have a visionary government, and we have a focused government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, $5.6 million investment in agriculture, a major productive sector, is money well spent. Can you imagine? Over 3,000 direct beneficiaries, Mr. Speaker, of which 803 are women. And we must applaud the women who are taking agriculture seriously in this country. Mr. Speaker, meanwhile, I also want to commend the 140 farmers of the Murragot constituency who are benefiting from this program. They're getting their fertilizers, they're getting their tools, their seedling, and we are even giving them cash, ladies and gentlemen, of course, Mr. Speaker, to increase their production. Mr. Speaker, farmers have never been happier in this country. And I want to repeat that, Mr. Speaker. Farmers have never been happier in this country. Because of this investment, they are in a better position to increase production, facilitate trade. They receive higher incomes. The rural communities, we see more economic activities in the rural communities, opportunities for export and foreign exchange, greater foreign exchange. So, Mr. Speaker, no wonder why the farmers of Grand Bay made a very, very loud statement by electing the Honorable Dr. Vince Henderson and the Dominica Labour Party during the last by-election, because they have confidence in this government ability and they realize that this government have their backs. Mr. Speaker, on this note, I want to commend Honorable Grant and his staff for doing a wonderful job in keeping agriculture alive in this country. The people of Wesley must be very proud of you, sir, and for continuing to encouraging our farmers to continue working on their farms. $5.6 million is money well spent. Mr. Speaker, anyone who would have seen this country one day after Hurricane Maria would understand why housing still remains a priority for this government. Telling me that 90% of our stock or the housing stock was destroyed is not enough. You would have to pass through Casabruce and Kalinago territory, Murragot and Wesley, the eastern side, to see the ravage of Hurricane Maria. Houses without roofs, houses, in some cases you could only see the washroom facilities in the Kalinago territory. Today, Mr. Speaker, if you go through those very same areas, you will see a complete transformation, Mr. Speaker, because of the Dominica Labour Party and the work that they started to do from day number one. You see construction of new homes, renovation of homes, buildings of apartments, housing assistance provided to every community across the length and breadth of this country. We will continue to provide the ordinary Dominicans with the dignity of a safe and proper home. Mr. Speaker, today I am pleased to report that an additional 28 families of the Murragot and Concord area will soon receive their new homes under the Dominica Housing Recovery Project, Mr. Speaker. And it doesn't end there, Mr. Speaker. I also want to indicate to this very House that 7 additional families will hopefully move into their 3-bedroom houses before Christmas under the Sustainable Housing Solution. Mr. Speaker, things are happening. And we sat here yesterday, and the leader of the opposition was totally consumed and overwhelmed with figures. And he wasn't able to tell you one thing that is happening in his constituency. But I am sitting right at the back, I'm taking note, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the 35 families who will soon receive their new homes, I express sincere gratitude to the Dominica Labour Party government. We have never seen such investment in housing by any government in our community before. This is Ed, may his soul rest in peace, should have spoken to me earlier. Surely, Mr. Speaker, Murragot would be much further. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the 99 people of Murragot who are currently benefited under the World Food Cash Program under the Ministry of Youth, I say thanks. These are vulnerable people, Mr. Speaker. People with disabilities, elders, single parents, who are in a better position now because of such a system. Mr. Speaker, the $7.3 million to settle costs associated with the management of COVID should not even be a matter of debate in this honorable House. The health of our nation is the wealth of our nation. So an investment in health should be applauded by both sides of this House. Are you suggesting that we should not spend money at the COVID facility? Are you suggesting that we should not feed our people? Are you suggesting that we should not provide them with medication? Are you suggesting that we should not take care of our healthcare people? What are you saying? This is what this money is being spent for. Mr. Speaker, my heart goes out to the frontline workers. Words cannot express our gratitude for the work that they continue to do to keep us safe. Mr. Speaker, while I'm on COVID, let me lend my voice to the many who continue to encourage friends and families to go out there and take the vaccine. We need entertainers to get back in business. We need small business to boom again. We need to ease up restriction, and we realize that the only path is to ensure that our people are vaccinated. I want to make a special appeal to the people of the Murragot constituency to go and get vaccinated. The Murragot district has recorded the lowest vaccination rate on island, and this is unacceptable. Let us go there and get vaccinated. Mr. Speaker, moving from vaccination, I want to go to the Murragot Hospital. As you know, this has always been my favorite subject in this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, anyone who questions the expenditure on the Murragot Hospital is simply telling you that they have no idea as to what is happening at the Murragot Hospital. They do not know what is happening at the Murragot Hospital. They have never been to the Murragot Hospital, so they have a reason to come and question the expenditure of the Murragot Hospital. Mr. Speaker, since last budget presentation, we included a number of changes that were not part of the original budget. For instance, we did an entire basement to include a fully equipped kitchen, a chapel, a laundry room, staff accommodation, a conference room, making our hospital the second, or making this hospital second to none in the entire region, Mr. Speaker. You go and you see a building, but Mr. Speaker, you have to step in to see what is there. This is magnificent. So, Mr. Speaker, I also want to inform this honorable House that we had to make allowance to purchase all the equipment and supplies so that we can get our hospital operationalized. Mr. Speaker, I must tell you that the Murragot Hospital has its own oxygen generating facility, which has the capacity to provide oxygen for every hospital on this island, even the Dominica China Friendship Hospital, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, go and see how the money is spent before coming here making outlandish statements as to hospital expenditure. Take your eyes and boil your peas, Mr. Speaker. Go and do some homework, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are talking about a 40,000 square feet facility, outfitting 75 beds. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about 2 floors and a basement. We're talking about operating theater, ICU, dialysis, radiology, dental, emergency care, laboratory, mortuary, Mr. Speaker. And we also have 3 delivery rooms, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, any parliamentary representative who would have received such gift in this hard COVID environment should be asking the Speaker permission to break dance in this parliament, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Murragot and Northeast community, I wish to thank the Labour Party government, MMC, Reno Construction, the 72 employees from Murragot and the Northeast, the Ministry of Planning, Health, Ministry of Public Works, and all who contributed to the success of this project. A promise made is a promise kept. And I really want to thank in a very special way the Honorable Roosevelt Skerritt and said to him, it is finished. Mr. Speaker, finally, I want to draw to your attention a small but significant appropriation under the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Planning. I speak to monitoring and evaluation, capacity building, climate finance proposal writing, physical planning, smart data management system, and digi-repeater for emergency communication network. Mr. Speaker, Dominica is listed as one of the most vulnerable places in this hemisphere. And everything that we can do to mitigate, effort geared at allowing us to be safer and more resilient, we should welcome it, Mr. Speaker. I am very satisfied with the progress of these capacity building programs. Monitoring and evaluation capacity building is scheduled to be completed on December 15th, 2021. The other projects are scheduled to be completed in the first quarter of 2022. I wish to thank the PS, Gloria Joseph, and the Ministry of Finance, the staff of the Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs and Planning, for their sterling contribution, Mr. Speaker, in pushing the climate resilient agenda. I also want to express gratitude to the UNDP for providing grant funding to undertake these projects. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, I wish to thank the people of Murragot and Concord who continue to express love to me and to show gratitude for the work done in the constituency by this government. Sincere thanks to Ms. Andrea Charles and the members of the NEP for the excellent work that you continue to do to keep our community clean. I want you to know that I value your contribution to the community. For many of you, it is not all about the salary or the stipend that you receive, but it is about the pride that you take in keeping your community clean. I want to big up my friend Garman and the guys on the block, the Sam's Gutter Improvement Committee, and all those who will be partnering with me to light up Sam's Gutter this Christmas. To the rest of Dominica, I want to say Merry Christmas, have a bright and prosperous new year, and I want to say long live this government, long live the Dominica Labour Party. With these few words, Mr. Speaker, I I fully endorse and support this measure for this Honorable House. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, yes. Yes, it's on. Yeah. Yes. I did some research on it again, and it's about 40,000 US. Yes, yes, yes. Yes. Yes.
I mean, I can always go there if it's better for everybody. It's okay. Mr. Speaker, a strong supporter of the United Workers' Party just posted this on his status. It's on the Roseau Valley. And I quote, "The UWP has become a nuisance in Dominica. Null and void," end of quote. This is what is being said. Mr. Speaker, first of all, I want to commend my friend and colleague, Honorable Roberts, for her excellent presentation of the supplementary estimates. She is very eloquent, Mr. Speaker, and having a background in education, she has presented exceptionally. And I also want to thank all my colleagues who have spoken thus far, and I know there are others who will speak after me, responding to the issues raised, but also explaining in further details the justification for the spending of this money. And I agree with all my colleagues who have spoken, and I endorse everything they say, and therefore I will not seek to repeat. But this is an extraordinary time where every single country in this world, developed, developing, undeveloped, have seen a dramatic decrease in revenues. There's no secret about this. And we have seen a dramatic increase in expenditure, largely to provide for the fight against COVID-19. And so, Mr. Speaker, we have always accepted in this Dominican Labour Party that we are just instruments doing the Lord's work. And so we give God thanks for providing this $275 million to the Commonwealth of Dominica to look after the people of the Commonwealth of Dominica. And every single Dominican has been impacted by this $275 million. Every single one. And I can say without any fear of contradiction, Mr. Speaker, that this Labour Party government can account and has been able to account for every single cent of its $275 million. And it is for these and other reasons why the global financial system, the institutions, organizations are committed to working with this government, because they know and they have proven by their own independent audits that when they give Dominica money under this Dominican Labour Party administration, the monies can be accounted for. You speak to the European Union, you speak to the World Bank, you speak to the CDB, you speak to the IMF, they will tell you. And you can speak to our bilateral partners. Because, Mr. Speaker, as you know, they come and they do their own independent audits, you know. They audit things. And they will tell you that Dominica is one of the better partners they're doing work with. And so we're very grateful for this. But there appears, Mr. Speaker, to be a calculated, premeditated attempt by the Workers' Party to undermine the Citizenship by Investment program. And every opportunity they get, and they even create opportunities, all in an effort to destroy the CBI, the major source of non-tax revenues for the people of Dominica. How could you want to lead people when you're seeking to take bread from their mouths and you're not in a position to give them biscuit? Where's your conscience as an opposition party? Where's your love for people? Where's your commitment to this country? Are you prepared, Mr. Speaker, to destroy the country in an effort to lead it? That you do not care about people? That's what it is. That you got an opportunity to be on CBS, and CBS had 90 million viewers. And you said nothing positive about Dominica. Nothing positive about Dominica. You went to Washington, you went to Miami, they came here to see you, that is Al Jazeera. All in an effort to undermine the CBI. And Mr. Speaker, you know what the Al Jazeera reporter recognized as an investigative journalist? Oh, but there's something wrong with this guy called Mr. Linton. It's not adding up. And they started to do an investigation on him. Mr. Linton, Mr. Speaker, on the records, public records, is the only person Honorable Mr. Linton is the only person on record selling Dominican passports. We don't sell passports. And for anybody to come to the house and to say that we're selling passports, it is only an attempt to see whether they can destroy the CBI, stop the revenue from coming in, and what's going to happen to the many interventions. That is what it is. That is what it is, Mr. Speaker. And it is important for Dominicans to understand what this is about. And the need for them to, notwithstanding their political affiliation, to stand in condemnation of this attempt, this calculated attempt by the UWP to undermine our economic citizenship program. Honorable Dr. Henderson gave a detailed explanation about the due diligence process, and I want to go through this. And how we are viewed in the marketplace. And Dr. Henderson is right. Thompson Fountain and Honorable Linton and the Workers' Party used to criticize us. They used to chastise us when we were just getting $53 million from the CBI. Chastise us. Now they see that the people of Dominica are, there's been a dramatic increase. Let us go and destroy it. And it is a pattern of behavior. It is a pattern of behavior, Mr. Speaker. But you know, God is good, and this UWP will never come into government in Dominica. Never. And yes, Mr. Austria will live 100 years. He's not dying now. He'll live 100 years. And when he gets to 100 years, Labour will be in government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they also sought to make heavy weather about the electricity bills. The crux of the matter, Mr. Speaker, is that this Workers' Party, who the people of Dominica gave an opportunity to lead the country for one term, Domlec was a thriving government-owned business. And a bankrupt UWP that bankrupt the country and desperate for money. Desperate for money. This is like a parent taking a child laptop in online learning and taking it to one of the fast money business places and to pawn it, Mr. Speaker, and to leave this child with access to a laptop for school, online learning. And what they did, Mr. Speaker, they guaranteed Domlec a profit in the legislation. And how Domlec would get to that profit every year is the fuel surcharge. That is why when all of us look at our electricity bill, the fuel surcharge is almost the same amount of how much electricity you consume. And what many of us don't know, that even if you're a generator, if you don't have an output and an input meter, what you generate is not going to save you money. You're still seeing your meter spinning. So you're still paying money to Domlec even when your meter's spinning, your generator on. And they put that fuel surcharge on people. And on top of that, Senator Marsley, the UWP went to the CDB and guaranteed a loan for Domlec, which the taxpayers of Dominica had to pay back. You're selling your company, Mr. Speaker, for 90% less than its market value. You're guaranteeing the people a profit of about 15%. You impose a fuel surcharge on the people of Dominica. And you still go to the CDB and you have a sovereign guarantee for that private international company. Clearly, some of you on the opposition may not you forget that. Mr. Speaker, for this year, I may have slept my house in Dakers 5 times. So I'm not there in my house. And my average bill is about $750 a month. $750. And I hear people complain, Dominicans complain. This is why we have been committed to the geothermal project. And this is why we are pursuing the geothermal project, Mr. Speaker. Even in the face of torrential criticisms from the opposition, we are committed to this because one of the ways we have been advised by independent experts to minimize and to reduce the cost of energy and electricity bills to Dominican consumers and businesses is to go the renewable energy route. That is what we're doing. We don't sit on our hands and not respond to the challenges of people. And then the people must understand that this UWP has been, is, and will be bad news for Dominica. And this is why they will continue to repose the confidence and the trust in the Dominica Labour Party. So, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the monies that have been spent in health care in this 275, you can go to those communities and see the health centers. You can go to Collier and see the health center. You can go to Pennville and see the health center. You can go to Newtown and see the health center, the Maho, and the list goes on. In Murragot, for example, under the cash transfer grant, 99 families benefited in Murragot. 99 families benefited. The Housing Revolution and the Housing of the Nation program. We've seen the homes and people have been elevated from where they were to where they are now because of those direct investments. Monies in the economy. All of the building materials purchased from local suppliers. All circulating in the economy. There's no better stimulus, Mr. Speaker, than a government spending for its public sector investment program. It trickles down, Mr. Speaker. Trickles down. You get no constructive suggestions from this opposition. Zero. Zero. And some of my colleagues have spoken about the vaccination program. They don't speak about those things and encouraging people to take vaccines. They took the vaccines quietly because they figure it's scary being the vaccine. They want those people taking the vaccine and so forth. And the only reason why the opposition here in Dominica, Mr. Linton and others, the Honorable Linton and others, have spoken about the vaccine is because they got a call from the U.S. Embassy telling them to go on radio and speak about the vaccines, instructing them to go and talk about the vaccines. And I challenge them to counteract what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm the Prime Minister of the country, so I know things. I know things, Mr. Speaker. I know. That's what it is. Because the U.S. told we can't be giving all these vaccines, we thank the U.S. for it, and you guys you encourage people to get the vaccines. And then, Mr. Speaker, education. The opposition gives people the impression that we have to wait for a budget to spend. And Honorable Lavin was right. That the drafters of the Constitution and the drafters of our laws recognize that running a family and running a country is a similar situation. It has to be practical, it has to be pragmatic, it has to be sensible. It allows for flexibility. And that's what the supplementary, every government has done so. What they do not like, Mr. Speaker, is to see to the extent to which the government, the Labour Party, is investing in people and developing this country, Mr. Speaker. That's what it is. Because this opposition party, Mr. Speaker, all they want to see is people live in poverty. They're happy. They want people to be all unemployed. They're vexed when Labour Party gives somebody a house. They're vexed. The Senator, Honorable Rivera, is correct. Farmers are the happiest now with the direct investment you're making in them. Grants, inputs, equipment, tools, empowering them, Mr. Speaker, and that's what we're doing. We cannot have to fight COVID, Mr. Speaker, as we're currently doing, and tell the people who have contracted the virus, or tell those who we are seeking to prevent from contracting the virus, that the budget was in July, and therefore we have to wait till next July to get some money from the Parliament to spend on you. That's the logical understanding of what the opposition is proposing. That's what it is. Zero interest in Dominica, Mr. Speaker. They come there unprepared, unplanned, and they just speak with a clear intention of being destructive. And then they speak about the NEP. The Senator Marston has suggested to us that we should terminate. If you look at it from a clear deduction from what he said, we should terminate the people of Penville who are the NEP because they were dressed with a Labour Party t-shirt and they were in violation of the public service regulations. That he is so angry to see so many Labourites in Penville, Mr. Speaker, employed. But I will say to him that he will win that seat when cock grow teeth. Mr. Speaker, I built the basketball court right in front of his house, you know. So you're going to see that right there for the young people of Penn, Mr. Speaker. He's my constituent. You know, he's my constituent. I wish somebody voted for me, I suspect you, Mr. Speaker. But you see, the problem you have on the opposition side is that there's nobody on that side to guide them. It is bereft of leadership. It has no leadership. They cannot go to the leader for guidance on anything. They can't say, Mr. Look, I wrote some notes, they're ready for me now. Nothing like that. What you need to do? No, nothing. And you need that in an organization. And within the Labour Party, we have many of those people. That's what it is. So I know, Mr. Master, you are very uncomfortable where you're sitting. Very uncomfortable, I know it. Very uncomfortable. And so, Mr. Speaker, this $270 million is well spent. You will see going forward a number of very important interventions across the country of housing, the roads enhancement.
10 more minutes.
Yeah, 10 minutes is fine, it's okay. Housing, Mr. Speaker. And one of the projects I am very excited about is this administrative building in Portsmouth that we have to pursue, Mr. Speaker. We owe this building to the people of Portsmouth. And the part of us who know that yet, that we're going to tie with the administrative building the bypass across to Sugarloaf there so that we address the bottleneck at Barrow Square, which has become a challenge for us because of the increased number of traffic in that place. So that will be tied in, and we'll do this project simultaneously to enhance that term, Mr. Speaker. And we have a proposal before us also for the marina. And I'm hoping soon that we can discuss it and we can action on it to bring further development to today. And we have also the roads enhancement. And we are discussing we have entered into agreement also looking at a cable car to the Boiling Lake. And one can appreciate the impact this will have on tourism and opportunities for us, Mr. Speaker. The international airport is on stream, and Dominica will have its international airport. And I heard something so condescending, not surprising, because nothing the leader of opposition says surprises me. Nothing. But it is so condescending. Here it is, Mr. Speaker. American Airlines did its own independent market research and financial investigations and has determined that it can fly into Dominica, direct flight from Miami, and that they will start 2 days a week. Before they started, they have informed us, Mr. Speaker, that they will fly from January 8th, 3 days a week. And they're saying to us further, the way things are looking, they will very well have a daily flight into Dominica straight from Miami, Mr. Speaker. And the leader of the opposition is in his condescending manner with no interest in the welfare and well-being of Dominican hoteliers and the employees in the hotels and the taxi men and the restaurants and the rental cars, the people who will all benefit from this direct flight in Dominica. He's saying it's an old plane that American Airlines is sending to Dominica. And this is, and understand the psychology of this man, you know, Mr. Speaker. What he's trying to do with this is to instill a sense of fear in the minds of potential travelers on American Airlines. And we said to the opposition and the leader of the opposition, shame on you and shame on the Workers' Party for castigating American Airlines. They have become a strong partner of Dominica in our thrust to build this country, Mr. Speaker. And instead of all of us standing, hailing American Airlines, hailing the American government, hailing the American people, Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition is here chastising American Airlines. This flight is so exciting, Mr. Speaker, that the ambassador wants to come to Dominica to be part of it. And we have the leader of the opposition. And you're talking about Senator Master, economic development when workers come. When workers come where? Come where? And when? My brother, when you're in government, it's hard work. We're making it look easy. This is hard work, especially when you're faced with challenging times. And I see no one on this side who has the capacity, the mental fortitude to be able to address issues in good times in this country, far more for difficult times. When you have, Senator John Finn, I knew her. I'm the one who got her to be appointed education officer, even though I know she was GWP, but I took her from the principal and make her education officer and so on. I mean, if you put in a shadow cabinet together, and you're looking for someone in opposition to be shadow minister of education, I mean, Sister John Finn is the person. But they appointed the member of Salisbury as the shadow minister of education. That's a regard there for education. Mr. Speaker, you see me, and you see us here. That which we did not achieve, we want people to achieve it. And that which we achieve, we want others to achieve it, Mr. Speaker. That's what we're about, you know. I celebrate people who have gone up. I celebrate them. You tell me about economic development. Who suffer here? Salisbury, the Roseau North. You can do anything, Mr. Speaker, with these people. And I see Senator Massey, in usual fashion, all fairness of him, he always agrees with us, and I see he's shaking his head. He's carried you right, you know. He's carried you right, yeah, he's checking boy, yeah, boy. My parent really right. I mean, I always agree with Scarrett on them things. So that's why sometimes, Mr. Speaker, when he agrees with us, they go outside and give him a little blows. And so he come in an uncharacteristic manner and trying to prove to them, boy, man, I support them fellas. So you give Australia a good job there and so on. I mean, so that's why it is, Mr. Speaker. So when senators speak, don't say anything bad about it. He's my constituent, so, okay, give a couple. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. We have work to do, Mr. Speaker. We'll advance the work. These are trying times, difficult times for many. We are engaging stakeholders to hear from them as to how we can respond to the challenges. But this Labour Party administration, by the grace of God, Mr. Speaker, is equal to the task. And Labour is the party that this country needs at this time, today and tomorrow, and certainly in the foreseeable future. And Dominicans, the vast majority of Dominicans, understand this. And I believe that if anybody in this country studying politics would have gotten a very clear message in the grand by-election as to what the general election in Dominica will look like in terms of the support and the commitment that the vast majority of Dominicans have for this Dominican Labour Party. So we will continue to work with the people, Mr. Speaker. This is $275 million that have been spent in the local economy over this period of time. It's money well spent and monies that can all be properly and accurately accounted for by this Dominican Labour Party administration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Honorable Blackmore, before you proceed, let me just make a few announcements. Administrative matters. Yesterday and today, I received a letter from the Honorable Shakira Lokad-Hippolyte indicating that she will not be able to be at the house yesterday and today because she's dealing with an urgent personal matter. Also, I received through the clerk that Senator Sanford will be late today. But I wanted to also point out something to this Honorable House. I received a note from the Honorable Prime Minister yesterday. He said, Honorable Speaker, I have to leave soon to attend a meeting with a foreign government. Please, PM. I wanted to say that because of the level of respect, exemplary leadership the Prime Minister have shown, and the full support he have given me as the presiding officer of this Parliament. Honorable Prime Minister, I want to just place on record, thank you for your support. I've tried my best to be balanced. You would realize that even on the other side, this is on the government side, I will get notes of courtesy and respect indicating that when members cannot be here. Everyone in Dominica would agree, and in this honorable house, that even the Honorable Reginald Austri have been very restrained based on discussions I've had with him. Yes, no, you tried. You tried. I mean, I cannot tell you what to do or say because you are a member of this house, so you can do what you have to do, but you have been very restrained since I've been the Speaker of the House. And also I wanted to point out two more items there. In regards, I just wanted to remind members that you have 30 minutes, and just to point out, Standing Order 41(6)(a) says, subject to subparagraph B and C, no member shall address the House for more than 30 minutes to any question. The mover of an original motion shall be entitled to 45 minutes for his opening speech and 20 minutes for his reply, his or her, that is. The time limited by this paragraph may be extended at any time by a motion made or carried out without amendment or debate. And the Speaker may rule. So I mean the usual, where members ask for additional 10, 15 minutes. No, you didn't. You didn't. And finally, I think all members here would understand that the presiding officer of Parliament is the Speaker of the House, but the Speaker also has a responsibility to Parliament. So if yes, members can debate and you cannot tell him what to say, but if a member is actually putting the state in bad light internationally in the House, I must take a stance. So I wanted to place on the record that yesterday when I indicated that it is wrong to say that we are selling passport or selling citizenship, I wanted to place it on the record of this Parliament that after it has been explained by the Honorable Henderson, I wanted to place on the record that moving forward, we have to be guided by this. We do not want to go to Standing Orders Committee to try to curtail everything people have to say in this House. But we have to be responsible as leaders. This is the highest court or legislative body of the country. So if we are actually saying to the world that we are actually doing something wrong or something, I would say, criminal, then who can really save our country? So again, I would like to thank the Honorable Prime Minister for his exemplary leadership, the respect he has shown to the House. Some members on the opposition side, when they cannot make it, they never send any courtesy or level of respect, any note. They come in, they leave whenever they wish, not extending any courtesies, any respect. Though I can't rule on that, but I wanted to point that out to this Honorable House and also for the public to know what the situation is. And that is why, and earlier there, the Prime Minister said, Mr. Linton, I said, no, the Honorable Linton. There are instances on this side, you would see we have pull ministers, and they have yielded and agree and just move on. When it is on the opposition side, the House ends up in disrepute, big argument. And the standing order, almost every little section, you'd see that the presiding officer and the final person to make the decision is the speaker. When we have a cricket game or a football game or basketball game, the referee doesn't have to explain and talk. He makes a decision, and everyone yields. But we are in this honorable house. I got a WhatsApp message from an elderly lady, and I want to tell her thank you, but I want to read the full message. In essence, what she said is, I would like to thank you for how you are dealing in this honorable house. You are not just the speaker, but you're actually trying to teach and coach. That's what I've been trying to do. It has been very difficult dealing with the opposition. And it is because I was once a member of the opposition United Workers' Party. You realize that the senators, they deal with a little more respect because they were not there at the time. So they don't come here with a heavy heart. I've tried my best, even if the rules gives serious authority to the speaker. I've tried to negotiate, take patience, do everything, try to help the opposition. But it has not worked. And therefore, moving on from today, I'm going to go by the book. The book I'm talking about is based on the standing orders. I'm not going to give explanation and long discussion for them so that they can say I'm lecturing them. I'm just going to rule, and I will go as per the standing order. Finally, I took a unilateral decision, hoping I get the support, because even the speaker is not above parliament. Took a unilateral decision to decide to pay the Honorable Danny Lugay from November 1st. But instead, you see what happened yesterday. No appreciation, no respect. And it is because they are coming there with almost a heavy heart that I left their party. So they are treating me badly, disrespectfully. So I'm not going to take any patience. I'm going to be doing it as I took the oath, without fear or favor, and just rule based on the standing orders. I've tried my best, and I'm getting it from all sides. People who have supported the Labour Party are saying, hey, you are taking so much patience. People who have supported the United Workers' Party, and I will tell them, members who have run for the United Workers' Party have told me that, hey, you are doing a great job. I like what you do. The only issue I have is you there trying to explain. Sometimes just rule. But I told him, no, I understand sometimes the disadvantage you are at when you are the minority. So I've tried all kind of ways. And I just wanted to just lay that on this table. So not only the Honorable House should know, but I think the general public should know. We have also, again, in this Honorable House, we have made two major decisions. One, we have already contacted DBS and we started it, where we started the program, Did You Know? This is a creature of the Parliament. That's the Clerk of the House and myself in the discussion with DBS. It is because people need to know. People need to know not on Q95. People need to know from Parliament. What is Parliament about? What are the rules? Yes, people voted members, but people did not vote members to come and disrespect members of parliament, insinuate corruption, not attend meetings, not carry out their role. So I will do another thing which is unprecedented. We will start from when we're dealing with administrative matters on naming who came and who did not come, so we have a roster, so the public can know. Finally, we have started on a Facebook for Parliament. We have taken the initiative, but as we said, even the presiding officer does not have authority over Parliament. So what we will do on both sides of the House, we'll get the clerk and the technical officer in the government system to discuss with members on the government side and the opposition side in regards to feedback, in regards to the Facebook page. Just an information page. But we are going to try those things. I've also said early, when I came in, I asked all members to give their suggestions on how we can improve Parliament. If you disagree with a decision, you could come to my office, discuss with me. Not disrespect the chair. Because in our parliamentary system, the real leader of Parliament is really the Prime Minister who holds that seat. But the presiding officer, who is the Speaker, take the lead from the House, the entire House. So I just wanted to lay this there on the table so we can understand the perspective and what I've been dealing with. It's one of the only jobs I know where as a judge, you have to make the decision on the spot. And the whole world is looking. So it's not an easy job. It's a job where you have to try to maintain balance. And I want to thank the government side for when I point out the standing order to them, they just withdraw and move on. I really want to place on record the special commendation to you for really giving me the full support. I cannot say that about the opposition side. And I rest my case, as I said, I'm going to rule strictly based on the standing orders. No more leeway. Let us go based on the book, because it's not working out as I thought it would. So let's go based on the book, the standing orders. Thank you, and I want to just sincerely apologize to the House for taking a little time there, but I needed to do this. Let's proceed. Debate continues.
May I, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the supplementary appropriation bill before this honorable House. And as a lover of cricket, especially in the 70s, late 70s, 80s, and early 90s, after Richard and Lara batted, that was it. Mr. Speaker, I am going to reference a few items, bearing in mind that over $5 million was spent at various levels at the Ministry of National Security and Home Affairs, and also $3.3 million at one of the most exciting constituency, the Mao constituency, to build the Mao Government Primary School. But before I do, Mr. Speaker, permit me, through you, just to refer to some of the misinformation from the other side. And Mr. Speaker, I say so because after the passing of Lawrence Brumant, a famous court teller in Dominica, I concluded that, Mr. Speaker, that no one could have actually emerged as a spectacular court teller as Lawrence Brumant. But after I listened yesterday from some of the presenters on the other side of the House, the honorable members on the other side of the House, I witnessed and listened to court reciting at the highest level. And the issue is, Mr. Speaker, although a court is a tale characterized by frictions, but some people believe courts. And that is why I'm going to respond. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, she's not in the House today, Honorable Senator Sanford, but she made reference to during the Workers' Party administration of an average 2.5 economic growth between 1995 to 2000. And someone you're listening would have drawn the logical conclusion that the administration of the Workers' Party then managed the economy very well. What a spectacular count, Mr. Speaker. I want to say further, Mr. Speaker, but simply referring to the growth performance of an economy does not give a holistic picture of the performance of that economy in terms of the size of the economy. And to say that, and to qualify what I've said just now, to say, Mr. Speaker, between that period she referenced, that is to say from 1995 to 2000, the gross domestic product of Dominica averaged $321 million. $341 million. And if you were to express that in easy currency, Mr. Speaker, $822 million at best. When you compare and contrast that, and I'm saying so, Mr. Speaker, because during the administration of the Workers' Party, there was no tropical storm Irma that destroyed the coast of Dominica, that disconnected the village of Scottshead. There was no Ophelia. There was no Erica. And there was no Hurricane Maria. And certainly there was no COVID. But by 2016, under the administration, and also incidentally, Mr. Speaker, there was no global financial meltdown. That notwithstanding, Mr. Speaker, by 2016, the gross domestic product of Dominica had grown to $1.6 billion. That's almost twice the size of the economy that actually existed then, to the period she referenced. And a colored student known by Super L once wrote a very beautiful song and asked the then Prime Minister to answer the question. I want the Senator, who is not there now, and the other members on the other side of this Honorable House to answer on her behalf. The $87 million overdraft to the National Development Bank left by the United Workers' Party. The $53 million, Mr. Speaker, of unpaid checks by the Workers' Party then. The economy was booming, though, that notwithstanding. The $9 million of unpaid LPOs by the then Workers' Party in a booming economy environment. Senator Maslin. The $33 million, Mr. Speaker, for you, owed to the Dominican Social Security, the Workers' Party administration at the time, for 4.5 years, did not pay contribution on behalf of the public servant. The economy was booming then. What a paradox. The $40 million of unpaid gratuity to public servants, then under the Workers' Party administration. Paradoxical, a booming economy. The $81 million, Mr. Speaker, owed to external institutions, and the $140 million owed to banks in Trinidad at interest rates of 14%. In 1999, under the Workers' Party administration, Mr. Speaker, through you again, the Workers' Party administration utilized $15 million credit from St. Lucia, held by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, to pay salaries to public servants, Mr. Speaker. The economy was booming.
Honorable Minister, you can indicate what is the relevance of going right
The relevance of referring to Senator Stanford was referencing the legacy left by the Workers' Party of 2.7% growth
Okay, proceed.
annually. Okay, fine. And as I said, the inference I drew from that the economy was booming, and the economy is toiled under the Labour Party. And Mr. Speaker, the list continues. The $13.6 million owed to the OECS Supreme Court, then by the Workers' Party, they owed everybody. And Mr. Speaker, the $11 million owed to local financial institutions, Mr. Speaker. And the $35 million, Mr. Speaker, debt they left at the then DBMC, Mr. Speaker. That is the legacy that the Labour Party has wiped away, Mr. Speaker. All these legacy items, except the $140 million, which we are still paying, the Dominican Labour Party, under the Roosevelt leadership, has done away with this legacy of hopeless financial management of the state of this country, Mr. Speaker. And that is what we're talking about, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to see further, before I just go to some of the issues I referenced just now. Because this supplementary estimate, Mr. Speaker, in my view, as you heard so eloquently from the new member for Granby, Honorable Dr. Vince Henderson, I think, Mr. Speaker, has to be tied to the broader developmental agenda of the Dominican Labour Party, Mr. Speaker. If you look at all the items that are listed there, most of them speaks to a broader developmental objective of the Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, which I'll get to just now. And to say, Mr. Speaker, the governing of this country historically has proved, Mr. Speaker, to be very difficult. We go back to the era of when the British retook Dominica in 1763, and the efforts at the time to establish Dominica as a plantation system economy was very difficult. At the same time, while that same emphasis was being placed in other member states within the West Indies and the Leeward Islands, Jamaica, Barbados, Montserrat, it was proven that it was very difficult to get Dominica to be a bona fide plantation system economy. Because, not only because of the Maroons at the time, not only because of natural disasters, Mr. Speaker, but because of the topography of the country, the limited useful land space. Those things are important. Even Montserrat at the time, when the sugar industry was booming, Montserrat, despite its smallest among the Leeward Islands at the time, produced twice the amount that Dominica produced. Barbados produced significantly more. St. Vincent, Mr. Speaker. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, you go back to 1899 and 1905, when the British sent down the great Hesketh Bell to re-engineer the effort to establish a plantation system. He went clearing all the lands, etc., to embark on a citrus endeavor. That too subsequently failed. And we have seen government after government tried in the late early 60s, late 70s. The Freedom Party that came after the Labour Party tried. But there was never the kind of emphasis that brought about the kind of social economic transformation that we're seeing now. It's not because the government at the time did not have the determination and the ambition, but there was no real structured plan, Mr. Speaker, and the ability by a leader to mobilize the requisite financial resources to get the things to transform lives in this country, Mr. Speaker. And that is what I see, honestly, when I read some of the items in this supplementary estimates, Mr. Speaker. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, going back to the estimates, Mr. Speaker, were $1.8 million and $667,000, Mr. Speaker, was spent, Mr. Speaker, as government counterpart funding by way of VAT to give support to the construction of regional emergency centers, shelters around the country. That too is tied to a broader developmental objective. Dominica becoming the first climate resilient country in the world. And how do you do that? If we do not build with the resilience against hazard on this country, Mr. Speaker. You can recall this historic speech at the United Nations after Hurricane Maria by our Prime Minister. And one of the fundamental ways to do that, Mr. Speaker, is to build the kind of infrastructure that will allow the country to return to normalcy as quickly as possible. And that is why we're constructing, Mr. Speaker, purposefully, Mr. Speaker, in Casabruce and in Jimmy, regional emergency shelters, Mr. Speaker. Did you hear them say anything about that? No. In a previous sitting of the House, the senator from Lapland made reference about nothing has been done, Mr. Speaker, to build regional shelters around the country. But now, well, that's why I'm saying you guys tell count. Mr. Speaker, in Jimmy, upon completion in December of 2021, this year, this facility in Jimmy, Mr. Speaker, will be able to house 500 people at a cost of $18 million. This facility in Casabruce will be able to house, Mr. Speaker, 300 people. And then you have a resource center component to it, which various communities will be able to use, even outside of a disaster situation, Mr. Speaker. That is what these measures, the measures before this honorable, or the supplementary appropriation bills, speaks to, Mr. Speaker. And can you imagine what it means? Because you can recall, Mr. Speaker, the conventional way we're used to providing shelters in times of disaster, using our schools, community centers, etc., even churches, in some instances, have been used as shelters. With those facilities, Mr. Speaker, there will be no need for that. There will be facilities specifically built, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that our people are kept safe, Mr. Speaker, and that is fundamental to our goal of building the first climate resilient country in the world, Mr. Speaker. That's what we're talking about. This is what this thing is about, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the other issue I want to raise, Mr. Speaker. And the member for Granby constituency, Dr. Vincent Anderson, the Honorable, referenced it, so I'm not going to go into absolute detail, except to say on the issue of the CBI program, Mr. Speaker, and to say, to give the people of Dominica the comfort that the notion that, Mr. Speaker, that our passports are being sold in a way similar to you or anybody else going to a travel agency to purchase a plane ticket, it is fundamentally misplaced, Mr. Speaker, and deliberately harmful. And it's done for the express purpose, Mr. Speaker, of derailing the program. And this is un-Dominican, Mr. Speaker. And to say further, that as the minister for now responsible for immigration, legally speaking, strictly legally speaking, every passport legally is supposed to be signed by the minister. That authority has been delegated for the signing of ordinary passport by the Commissioner of Police of Dominica, the Deputy Commissioner of Police of Dominica, and the head of immigration. They sign ordinary passports, Mr. Speaker. I'm saying that to say, Mr. Speaker, every blank book is kept in the care of the police on a lock and key in Dominica, Mr. Speaker. You say that. So my advice to the Dominican public, I know a court is exciting, it's juicy, but don't listen to it. It is not true, Mr. Speaker. And further to the comprehensive process of due diligence referenced by the Honorable Member for Parliament of the Gambia constituency, Dr. Henderson. After this protracted due diligence process with the various agents, etc., and persons that we have so entrusted to work on our behalf, every application is sent to the implementation system, Mr. Speaker, or management for crime and security within the CARICOM framework. Every application is sent before impacts, what is called impacts, for further review. So the government does everything possible to ensure that the fundamental process of due diligence is adhered to, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to say that. So anyone, Mr. Speaker, who is involved in any fraudulent practice, insofar as the issuance of a passport is concerned, will be pursued not only by the law agencies in Dominica, but by the international law agencies, Mr. Speaker. That is what we're doing there for. And to have a Dominican passport, Mr. Speaker, you have to be first a naturally born Dominican, or in the case of a CBI or a person who have attained citizenship under the program that we are speaking about, you are issued with what we call a certificate of naturalization, which is issued by the minister, signed. Upon receiving that, you can now therefore apply to the central issuing agency, which is in Dominica, Mr. Speaker. So nobody, and let me say that again, just to crystallize what I've said, nobody can sign a Dominican passport except the Commissioner of Police, who signs on behalf of the minister, or the Deputy Commissioner of Police, or the Inspector in charge of immigration, who signs on behalf of the minister. And the minister signs diplomatic passports and service passports, etc. So let us not do this thing that you're doing there to black eye a program which is important for all of us and for our survival and the advancement of our country, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to say that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, much has been spoken about protecting our borders. And you realize in this supplementary estimate, $946,000 was spent to reconstruct the Coast Guard base, the jetties, so to speak, in Focoli. Mr. Speaker, protecting our borders does not only entail, Mr. Speaker, having enhanced security in our passports, as we now migrate from the missionary passport to the e-passport. It does not only mean, Mr. Speaker, the improvement and upgrade of our border management system, as you have seen in the estimate, provision is also made for the upgrade of our border, and the cultivation of our white list, and to facilitate also advanced cargo and passenger information. But because we have very porous borders, Mr. Speaker, we have to ensure that we have what we call the tools of trade, the water platforms, to effectively, Mr. Speaker, police our waters. But in order to do so, Mr. Speaker, the police and the Coast Guard unit must be able to properly launch those water platforms. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, we have invested in the rehabilitation of a new jetty at the Coast Guard base. And I want to take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to highly commend the officers at the Coast Guard base. They have demonstrated the highest commitment to service to country, Mr. Speaker. Because notwithstanding the deplorable state of the jetty, they continue to go out under adverse weather conditions, Mr. Speaker, in a COVID situation to protect our borders, Mr. Speaker, and they have to be commended for that, Mr. Speaker. And to say further, the system is working because the funding for this jetty that I've just referenced came from local circumstance. And it was as a result of the proceeds of the forfeiture fund, Mr. Speaker, that we were able to use that money from the forfeiture fund to build this jetty at the Coast Guard base. And I want to commend the FIU and the Costa, the drug squad, and all the players who have been involved in our anti-money laundering efforts, Mr. Speaker, in this country. So the system is working, Mr. Speaker, under the Dominican Labour Party, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the court represents the foundation of any civilized society. And the state, therefore, has a legal responsibility to provide adequate accommodation for our courts, Mr. Speaker, inclusive also of the registry. So we're talking about Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, civil and criminal. And then you heard before and after the passage of Hurricane Maria that there was a hoopla about the condition of the court. We gave a commitment, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that the state will provide proper accommodation for our courts. But you know what we were started with at the time? housing stock almost totally destroyed, etc. Now, Mr. Speaker, you're seeing $1.1 million was spent to ensure that the registry, inclusive of our Supreme Court, can be relocated. And I want to therefore inform the general public that works on the construction works have been completed and come after the Christmas as we enter the new year. The registry, inclusive of both courts, will be at a newly refurbished, modernized environment, Mr. Speaker. That is what the supplementary appropriation bill speaks to, Mr. Speaker, and all those interventions that we're talking about, Mr. Speaker. So I wanted to also reference that. Mr. Speaker, I can recall, along with some of my cabinet colleagues, we went to a groundbreaking ceremony in Maho, the village where I was born, and incidentally, the primary school which I attended. And I'm saying that because $3.3 million, Mr. Speaker.
Nine more minutes.
$3.3 million, Mr. Speaker, who actually spent for the construction of a modern, first-class government primary school in Mao. The days when I went to school in Mao, I can recall of coming to school sometimes, no pipe on water. That was the fact, no pipe on water, Mr. Speaker. And I want to take this opportunity to ask the Minister for Education have done. I want to commend the Minister for Education and officials within the ministry for her support, Mr. Speaker. The principal, including the former principal, Mrs. Roberts, and the current principal, Ms. Stedman, and all the teachers, the parents, and the students must be commended. At no time, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the very uncomfortable environment in which they have to go to school before the last COVID surge, Mr. Speaker, they never actually complained, or there was no industrial strike action, Mr. Speaker, by the teachers. And that, too, Mr. Speaker, must be commended. They must be commended for that. And I can recall also, Mr. Speaker, at the Mao School, that we had on the chalkboard, Mao School is the best, a slogan. But that slogan actually disappeared after Maria, because there are no school and buildings, so to speak. So I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, to report, based on what I've been advised, that by February of next year, we'll be having the best primary school in Dominica in the Maho community, Mr. Speaker. Now, don't get vexed, all work for that. And I want to, again, Mr. Speaker, express my gratitude to the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, and notwithstanding the COVID situation, that we're spending all that money to build a new school. And then when I heard members on the other side, including Mr. Senator Marcelin from Penville, a quiet, so to speak, Penville, said there's nothing in the appropriation bills for Dominicans. Yes, you said that, yes. Yeah, all that need to. Yes, Mr. Speaker. Right? The school has been built in Mao. The students are from where? Holland? So, Mr. Speaker, those are issues, Mr. Speaker, that speak to the core of the mission of the Labour Party to advance this country, Mr. Speaker, once and for all. Mr. Speaker, the health center in Maho, top class, Mr. Speaker. Another measure in the supplementary estimate, Mr. Speaker. And for those, Mr. Speaker, I can recall that they said that the school would never have been built. And when we went to the groundbreaking ceremony, the students, of course, having been in that school setting for more than 2 years, 3 years, they had a nice little, and they said, in front of the Prime Minister, the Minister for Education, and all of my other colleagues, that it come in. They still were not convinced that it was coming. A little cynical kind of stuff coming. But I want to say to the students of Mao and the teachers of the Mao Primary School that it come. It come, Mr. Speaker. Within the context of what was said, Mr. Speaker. All right? Within the context, Mr. Speaker. So, as we speak, the school is being primed and it's going to have all the functionalities that a modern primary school should have. Computer room, early childhood education section. As you know, early childhood education is the formative years of a child's education. The most spectacular auditorium in Dominica, Mr. Speaker, and the list goes on, Mr. Speaker. That is what the Labour Party is all about. And Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, with your permission, I referenced in my contribution the 2 regional emergency shelters. But I have to also, Mr. Speaker, as you saw in the supplementary appropriation, that we are also purposefully building emergency operation centers throughout the country. In Cotton Hill, Mr. Speaker, $4.3 million. And I want to express my gratitude on behalf of the government to SOFCOM, the US SOFCOM. In Castle Bruce again, $2.4 million. You have storeroom space for emergency supplies and food in the event of a disaster, and you have an office, Mr. Speaker. And then going back to Capuchin, we're augmenting our communication network with a radio system. As you know, Mr. Speaker, the radio system has a greater degree of redundancy, Mr. Speaker, especially, Mr. Speaker, after a disaster. So those are some of the feats, Mr. Speaker. And I'm only talking about some of the inclusions, Mr. Speaker, insofar as the Ministry of National Security and Home Affairs is concerned, Mr. Speaker. But I'm saying that to say, Mr. Speaker, that this supplementary estimate before us, Mr. Speaker, can be tied to a broader developmental agenda of the Dominican Labour Party that speaks to building back better, that speaks to building the first climate resilient country in the world, and that speaks to building a dynamic Dominica, Mr. Speaker. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I rise to make my contribution to the supplementary appropriation bill being debated before this honorable House. The supplementary appropriation bill in the amount of $275,000, Mr. Speaker, $275,150,327.13. Mr. Speaker, I have no hesitation in supporting this bill because I can see for myself, Mr. Speaker, the benefits of the expenses, Mr. Speaker. I can see for myself, Mr. Speaker, monies well spent. All over the country, you can see it, Mr. Speaker. And what makes me even more elated about this present supplementary appropriation before us is the time in which it was spent. I mean, it's no secret what COVID has done to Dominica, to our economy, and the rest of the economies around the region, Mr. Speaker. And what we have had to do to fight COVID and to put the systems in place. I mean, we can almost say, literally, a complete and brand new hospital had to be built in Portsmouth just to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. Speaker. Urgent and important needs. Urgent and important. I mean, a classic example, look at us in this house. We come to this house yesterday, Monday, to debate, and for some reason, the PA system that was checked days before refused to malfunction in this honorable house, right here. Broke down, Mr. Speaker. And as a result of that, we now hearing from the Speaker that a new system has to be bought at a price tag of $40,000 US. An essential piece of equipment that we need in the execution of our work at the highest level. And basically, that is why you have supplementary appropriations coming. In our homes, Mr. Speaker, you budget, you know Christmas is coming, you perhaps want a new television, you want some new carpet, you want to change your furniture in your house. But lo and behold, Mr. Speaker, your stove goes bomb. The same stove you have to use to cook your hams and bake your turkey. You have to run to courts, you have to go to Asafan because you have to eat. That is reasons why in our ordinary lives and in the life of a government, situations and circumstances arise in which you have to make expenses, Mr. Speaker. So that is why I find for seasoned parliamentarians in this house, really, it shouldn't take us so long going back and forth on the supplementary appropriation, Mr. Speaker. And even if we go through the items, item by item, we would expect from the opposition to get credible arguments as to, okay, you wouldn't spend so much in health, but you would invest in education. You would invest in education, but you will invest in housing. And go through the list of items upon which monies have been spent, Mr. Speaker, and critically analyze it. But that is not what we have been getting from the opposition. We could have sat in this house and quietly listened to them, Mr. Speaker. Quietly listen to them. And like I have always said in this house, throughout my period in this house, Mr. Speaker, there is a time between the years 1995 and 2000 where the period of mismanagement of the economy was so severe that it plunged Dominica, Mr. Speaker, onto the brink of bankruptcy. That is where we were, Mr. Speaker. And today, to be here in this honorable house, having to debate an expense of $275 million being spent, Mr. Speaker, is a feat that every single Dominican should be proud of. We should have support across the aisle, on both sides of the aisle, because every single Dominican, when I look at the items, their lives have been touched by these expenses, Mr. Speaker. And take, for example, we are here debating whether we should make that expense on the proposed international airport. The international airport we're building now, Mr. Speaker. But 20 years ago, we should have had our international airport, Mr. Speaker. 20 years ago, we should have had our international airport. The United Workers' Party in 1999, Mr. Speaker, went to Trinidad and took a loan at the Royal Merchant Bank for $140 million, Mr. Speaker, at 14% interest. And if you do the maths, right now, Mr. Speaker, the taxpayers of this country have had to pay back $500 million, Mr. Speaker, that we would have had right now to invest in our international airport, Mr. Speaker. That is what we should be talking about. That is what they should be talking about, Mr. Speaker. Monies that are actually wasted, and we had to pay that money back with no attendant benefits to show for it, Mr. Speaker. The citizens of Dominica, the taxpayers of Dominica, have nothing to show $500 million later, Mr. Speaker. So we shouldn't be talking about our international airport right now. We should perhaps be talking about expansion of the international airport had the monies been spent properly, Mr. Speaker. A loan that was taken in August, September of 1999, and before December 31st, 1999, Mr. Speaker, the treasury of Dominica was empty. So much so, Mr. Speaker, that in December of 1999, salaries, Christmas salaries of people to go and do their shopping, Mr. Speaker, for teachers and policemen and nurses, Mr. Speaker, public servants, waiting on their little Christmas shopping salaries which you would normally get around the 19th or the 20th, so you could shop for Christmas. Mr. Speaker, those salaries were paid at 3:30 on the 24th of December, 1999, Mr. Speaker. 3:30 on the 24th, because they couldn't pay it, Mr. Speaker. You know who paid? You know who paid the salaries, Mr. Speaker? The government of St. Lucia had to allow the government of Dominica to use their allocation at the ECCB, Mr. Speaker, to pay salaries in December of 1999. Christmas Eve, that was when persons, Mr. Speaker, was receiving their salary. And you know what was worse, Mr. Speaker? But if you're going to take a loan, you go to the Fast Cash, or you go to Big Edge, or there's another one you can bring your laptop or your television in town there. What's his name? And they'll give you some money, Mr. Speaker. Cash whiz. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You have to know in your mind, and we're not talking about the credit union, the big institution like credit union or the banks, yet. Just the little ones we're talking about. You have to know in your mind, Mr. Speaker, how you're going to pay the people back. Mr. Speaker, the government, after having received that money from the ECCB, which was St. Lucia's allocation, Mr. Speaker, defaulted in January, Mr. Speaker, defaulted on their first installment of that loan, Mr. Speaker. So, I mean, this is the atmosphere we met the country in, Mr. Speaker. This was the economic climate in Dominica, at the time when this government came to power. That is what we met, Mr. Speaker, and that is what we had to deal with. And for us to be here, Mr. Speaker, we should be shouting from the rooftops that we have a surplus right now to invest into the lives of the people. We should be thanking God, Mr. Speaker, for the blessings He has poured down upon us. We shouldn't be here arguing whether we spend that money and whether we overspend that money. I mean, Mr. Speaker, why are we doing that, Mr. Speaker? We witnessed the devastation of Hurricane Maria. Mr. Speaker, we witnessed the devastation of Hurricane Maria, Mr. Speaker. Can we say that the emergency shelters being built right now, I don't know when last you drove along the West Coast, Mr. Speaker, and you saw, I come into that, that's why I go into, you drove down the West Coast, and you saw that magnificent edifice. Aren't the people of Jimit, aren't the people of St. Joseph and Layu, aren't they deserving, Mr. Speaker, of such shelter in times of hurricane? And we know now that the weather systems have become more frequent and more ferocious. Aren't the people of Cassie Bruce entitled to protection, Mr. Speaker? Aren't the people of Lagos, close to Portsmouth, where we have started the other hurricane shelter, Mr. Speaker, entitled to that level of protection? That is where the money went to. That's what the spending that we debated here in this house. These are the facts. That is what the supplementary appropriation is all about, Mr. Speaker. I remember after Hurricane Maria, months after Hurricane Maria, we had persons in the Rosie Douglas Primary School, Mr. Speaker, and I couldn't go there in good conscience and ask them to vacate the school to allow children to start classes because they had nowhere to go. We had homes that were completely devastated by Hurricane Maria. At least not one member of the opposition can come and support that initiative. Mr. Speaker, not one member can support that initiative, Mr. Speaker. Look at what happened to us. We're talking about disasters. We're still on the issue of disasters, Mr. Speaker. Do you remember there was a disaster, I believe, in 2015 called the Christmas Trough? Do you all remember the Christmas Trough? Mr. Speaker, we lost a number of crossings. And our sister island again, just like St. Lucia allowed, you see, because there's camaraderie and there's collaboration between the islands, Mr. Speaker, just like St. Lucia allowing Edison James, Prime Minister Edison James at the time, to use St. Lucia's allocation because Dominica was broke. St. Vincent came to our rescue by allowing us to have some Bailey bridges, Mr. Speaker, to repair our damage. Do you all remember that? That is how sister islands operate. So when the La Soufrière volcano erupted, Mr. Speaker, we were in a position now because we had repaired our financial position and we had some surplus so that we could give to St. Vincent 1 million EC dollars, Mr. Speaker. That is what the government do, Mr. Speaker. Cash, $1 million cash. Can the opposition support that, Mr. Speaker? Can the opposition support that? Is it the Bible that tells you, Mr. Speaker, that God loves a cheerful giver? It is better to give, Mr. Speaker, than to receive. And when you give, Mr. Speaker, to those in need, God opens up the storehouses of heaven and pours out a blessing 100-fold on you, Mr. Speaker. That is what God does. But I do expect the opposition to know about those things. It is not in their nature to give. Natural disaster upon natural disaster have passed, and not one constituent within the opposition-held constituencies can tell you that they saw their parliamentary representatives come to their rescue, Mr. Speaker. Not one, I challenge them. Not one of them can tell you that, Mr. Speaker. But we will remain undaunted. We will continue, Mr. Speaker, to do the work of the people of Dominica, because that is what they put us there to do, Mr. Speaker. And that is what we have been focusing on. That is what we have been focusing on, Mr. Speaker. That is what we will continue to do. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, in the supplementary appropriation, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister, in his wisdom, and the Ministry of Finance established the vulnerability risk reduction. So that is from the CBI, you know. So when you hear them tell you the citizenship by investment program, Mr. Speaker, we're wasting it. We're not using it, we're not investing it on sustainable ventures. That is what sustainability is about. So that when you establish the vulnerability risk reduction, if perchance another Hurricane Maria were to hit you because of your location you don't know, Mr. Speaker, then you have the vulnerability risk reduction fund at least to start your recovery even before the international community comes to your assistance. That is money well spent at the ECCB. That is a prudent government, Mr. Speaker, that can invest monies for rainy days, literally, Mr. Speaker. When things are good with you, you put something aside so that at least you can come back to it. And that is what our citizenship by investment program is allowing us to do. And that is why it is so cherished and it's so treasured. And Mr. Speaker, I'm a student of history. And because the Labour Party has been in power for the last 20 years, there are 18 and 20 and 19 and 20-year-olds right now, Mr. Speaker, who do not know and understand what the country was like before the Dominican Labour Party took office. So I want to tell the nation that it wasn't the Dominican Labour Party that invented the citizenship by investment program, Mr. Speaker, when we hear the opposition speaking. Mr. Speaker, in 2003, in 1993, Mr. Speaker, 1993, after bananas was challenged at the WTO by Dole, Del Monte, and Chiquita, Mr. Speaker, and we lost the preferential treatment on the British market. That is another story by itself that we can't tell today, because it was the United Workers' Party that promised the farmers of Dominica $1 a pound of bananas to win the election. Yeah. And it was Edison James, Mr. Speaker, who was the chairman of DBMC at the time, Mr. Speaker, who resigned because the Prime Minister of the country refused to give him an increase on an $8,000 salary, Mr. Speaker. That is the record of the United Workers' Party, Mr. Speaker. So they came to power on that. The farmers of the country believed in them, Mr. Speaker, and that is how they came to power, Mr. Speaker, on that, right? So when bananas was going out, when the Dominican Labour Party in opposition, Rosie Douglas, brought United Kingdom parliamentarians down here to warn people, together with Eugenia Charles, who was the Prime Minister, that we must diversify, we must spread the risk and invest in other income-generating activities. And that was when the Freedom Party government in 1993 invented what was called the Economic Citizenship Program at the time. That was the grandfather of the CBI we're talking about now, Mr. Speaker. And again, the United Workers' Party, just being formed in 1988, about 5 years before that, started criticizing the program. They sabotaged the Layu River program. That was the first CBI, really, which was the Economic Citizenship Program, project that was being pursued in Dominica in the Layu Valley, Mr. Speaker. And Mary Eugenia Charles of blessed memory, the Prime Minister of the country at the time, started that program, Mr. Speaker, and was generating funds from the Economic Citizenship Program to build the Layu River Hotel. United Workers' Party criticized the program at that time. They were on the Layu Bridge shouting, "Ching Chong, go home," Mr. Speaker. That is what they were doing. Lo and behold, as God is at the police, Mr. Speaker, God gave them the country to run. Look, all the criticizing, God gave them the country in 1995, Mr. Speaker. And what did they do? If you were criticizing a program in 1993, 2 years later, you in the position where you can do something about the program. Well, scrap it now. If it was a bad program, scrap it and do away with it. They didn't do that, Mr. Speaker. What they did, Mr. Speaker, in their dishonesty is they came to the public and they said, well, we will re-engineer the program. And so they started with a re-engineered economic citizenship program, Mr. Speaker. So when you hear allegedly re-engineer, Mr. Speaker, you had government ministers under the United Workers' Party minister walking around with the economic citizenship checkbook in their pocket, Mr. Speaker. That is what it was, Mr. Speaker. Today, not one minister of government, not even the Prime Minister, can sign on the CBI account, Mr. Speaker. You have public servants, the financial secretary, Mr. Speaker. These are the people. And what is important for us to understand, because I heard the leader of the opposition talking about how much money going there, Mr. Speaker. What is important for us to understand is there are different components to that program. The way the program started, Mr. Speaker, was you had the real estate component. So what you do is you have a developer coming to Dominica and saying, I want to build a hotel. So say you had originally the Layu River Hotel. More recently, you had the Kempinski Hotel, Mr. Speaker. You have the Anichi in Picard. You have the Tranquility Beach in Salisbury, Mr. Speaker. So what happens is these investors, they go abroad and they market the program. I don't know if you have seen the Tranquility Beach, Mr. Speaker, recently. That, when it is completed, I guarantee you, will be one of the most magnificent hotel development projects in the Eastern Caribbean, from what I have seen, Mr. Speaker. Okay, a local guy from Newtown who left Dominica a couple of years ago, migrated to Montserrat, volcano erupt, he was given the option of moving to England because Montserrat was a British colony, but he decided to move to Anguilla, which was associated with England, and the story goes on, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So these are the items that we have in the supplementary appropriation here, Mr. Speaker. And it is the CBI that is driving all of those issues, Mr. Speaker. And that is why we have to cherish the CBI. We have to cradle the CBI. But, I mean, the leader of the opposition went to the Prime Minister a couple of years ago, and he wanted to be an agent, He brought a Taiwanese lady called Miss Cheng, He wanted to be an agent of the CBI program, a couple of years ago. So, I mean, I'm not yielding, Mr. Speaker. I'm on my feet. If the leader of the opposition has a point of clarification that he wants to make, he can make it after my contribution. But unless you start on a point of order, then I am not yielding, Mr. Speaker. I'm making my contribution. Okay, Mr. Speaker? So that is why, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the United Workers' Party, I can tell that. The United Workers' Party have a history of sabotage as far as the Citizenship by Investment Program is concerned. Mr. Speaker, it's not me that went on CBI with Dan Rather, who has a viewership of millions in the United States. It's not me that did that, Mr. Speaker. And told the world that them fellas have a mail-to-order program. You know why it's a mail-to-order program, Mr. Speaker? That is what those girls do for their nails and their cutex and everything on Amazon, they call it. When they can stay here and go on the internet and order a thing from Amazon and you get it in customs, you know, Mr. Speaker. That is what the leader of the opposition, Honorable Lennox Linton, member for the Murragot constituency, said. It wasn't me that said that, Mr. Speaker. It wasn't me. It's on, you on record, Mr. Speaker. And lo and behold, when the chips fell and the dust was cleared, Mr. Speaker, his signature was on the Al Jazeera report as having, Mr. Speaker, queried diplomatic positions, even when he didn't even win the election yet, Mr. Speaker. That is on record, Mr. Speaker. That is on record. Have a program, Mr. Speaker, have a reputation for wanting to damage the program, wanting to kill the goose that lays the golden egg for Dominica. So, Mr. Speaker, if you and your brother, your siblings, Mr. Speaker, have a problem, your father died, he didn't leave a will, and all you have a little confusion as to who should get what, Mr. Speaker, in the house. Can you go outside the house and burn the house down? And when you burn the house down, where you going to sleep tonight, Mr. Speaker? Where you going to sleep tonight? When United Workers' Party is finished and the opposition is finished burning the house of Dominica down, Mr. Speaker, where is it that they're going to inherit, Mr. Speaker? You want to build from the ashes? After all that we have been through? We went through Erica, mash up Petit Savan. Look at what the CBI has been able to create in Bellevue, Chopin today, Mr. Speaker. You go around the country, Mr. Speaker. Look at the persons who have worked hard in Dominica, driving, she went to school on truck through the Trans-Insular Road, through Daybush. The people who got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to Fouye different to bake bread in those stone bakeries, Mr. Speaker. The men who built shingled houses, who work hard in this country, and because they didn't work for government, they cannot enjoy a social security benefit. So the government is using some of the CBI to give them a 70 and plus pension, non-pension, so that they could buy their little groceries, they could pay their little television to watch their little movies and little news, and you against that? And you're developing a reputation, and Dominicans are hearing you saying that, Mr. Speaker. The Senator Masley called people, call the NEP people by the road. He said, yeah, Mr. Speaker, call them swine stuck in mud. That's how you refer to the NEP people, Mr. Speaker. That was the statement, a drift of swine stuck in mud, Mr. Speaker. That is how you refer to them, Mr. Speaker. Huh? Mr. Speaker, he referred to the NEP people. Mr. Speaker, when the member spoke yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the member said that the NEP workers are a bunch of good for nothing. Mr. Speaker, that's what you said. That's what you both of them. That's what you said. That's what you said.
You said both. You call them both. I have it on one. I was coming after you. I was coming after you. You said both. I have it there.
As a matter of fact, the records of the House shows that the Speaker has told me I can't use this analogy to speak to members of this House. And I refrain and I withdraw.
But you said it.
But you said it.
But you said it. You said it. You said it.
Honorable member.
You might have withdrawn.
Honorable member. Honorable member.
You lock it down. I was coming after you.
Honorable member.
Ian saved you. Ian just saved you there.
So Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member.
So, Mr. Speaker.
I sat down in this house, and I remember clearly the words that you said. And I believe that Honorable Douglas is not wrong. Honorable Douglas, please continue. Honorable Douglas, please continue. Yes. Yes.
You
seat.
I'm not taking that. You want to suspend House?
Young man, take your seat.
Comparable to a drift of swine stuck in economic.
Young man, take your seat.
Situation that they cannot manage.
Young man, take your seat.
And the minister said,
Pastor, take your seat. Take your seat, brother. Take your seat, Pastor. Take your seat when the house continues.
Yeah. Okay, okay. Hello. Honorable member. Honorable member. Calm down. Calm down. Honorable member and members of this house, I move that this house be suspended for 5 minutes.
Take your seat, boy.
House resumes and debate continues.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, Mr. Speaker, before I was interrupted, Mr. Speaker, that the record of this government on the management of the affairs of state is clear and is impeccable, Mr. Speaker. And it is there, the record is there for all to see, Mr. Speaker. Look at, and as I was explaining, look at all of the natural and man-made disasters that we have had to encounter. Note, I say, the man-made disaster, Mr. Speaker, that we were confronted with, and we have been confronted with, Mr. from 2000. That is what I was talking about. Up till the COVID, we have not gotten a respite.
Informed by the Deputy Speaker that you have an additional 10, well, you have 10 minutes.
Very well.
Balance.
I shall.
Yeah, from your presentation. So 10 minutes. Yeah.
Look at what we have done. We have worked hard. We have sacrificed, Mr. Speaker. And today we have a surplus. Today our cup runneth over, Mr. Speaker. All of us in this house should be celebrating the successes, because the success of the Dominica Labour Party, Roosevelt Skerrit-led government, is the success of Dominica. When the regional and international community and the political pundits of this world are looking at what is happening in Dominica, Mr. Speaker, they do not say per se it is Dr. Skerrit or the Labour Party. They say it is Dominica, Mr. Speaker. In political campaigns in the region, in our sister islands, people refer to what we are doing in Dominica, you know. The opposition parties in other countries are telling the government, look at what Dominica is doing with their citizenship by investment program. Dominica is building resilient homes for their people. 200, I'm coming to that, thank you. $200,000 and $300,000 homes given to single mothers, Mr. Speaker, free of charge. Look at what is happening on the riverbank there right now, Mr. Speaker. A new member of parliament just reached. She green, she doesn't seasoned like me, Mr. Speaker. Look at what has happened on the riverbank, on the promenade. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The latest phrase now originated from the promenade. What was the phrase again? It's dirt. Mr. Speaker, that is the kind of energy. That is the kind of energy and I catch on it. Yeah. That is the kind of energy and optimism, Mr. Speaker, we have emanating from the Dominica, that the Dominica Labour Party have created, Mr. Speaker. That is what it is, Mr. Speaker. That is what we have created. A sense of optimism, Mr. Speaker. A brighter future. People want to move back from islands either to they migrated to find work. They want to come back now, and there will be opportunities for them to take advantage of in this new dynamic Dominica that we are talking about, Mr. Speaker. That is what we are talking about. So the people of Dominica have placed their trust in this government. They will continue to do so, Mr. Speaker, for this foreseeable future. And we will continue to remain dedicated. And at the ending statement of the supplementary introduction speaks about that, you know, we will remain disciplined, but we will remain humble. We will remain focused, Mr. Speaker, and we will remain dedicated to serving the people of the Commonwealth of Dominica. May God bless the Dominica Labour Party. May God bless the Roosevelt Skerrit-led administration, Mr. Speaker, and may God bless the people, the masses of the Commonwealth of Dominica. I thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I move that this Honorable House be suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
It has been moved and seconded that this House be suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. House stands suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
Mr. Speaker!